So, back into our project, we will see how we can add rebindable controls like this into a game. Okay, and this will work just fine, as I saw in the previous part. And I can also reset my controls back to what it was. Now we're gonna see the scripts and all that from here, and we will see how to actually implement our own input manager into a game or into another project. Now, as far as the UI is concerned, let's go back. Okay, let me close the main menu and let's open the controls menu. The controls menu has two things inside. One is the rebindable controls dialog over here, which also has its own script, and it's basically a simple thing, just a reference to the text, to this text over here, and when you call to initialize it, then you simply change the text. The other thing that it has is the control rig, where every prefab we have into 4 axis, it's going to go inside it, and it's going to basically create it in a grid, of course. And the every axis button will have its own script, which has a reference to the axis name, to the key text, okay, all inside it. And we need also an axis name, which is the actual axis we'll be changing, and if it represents the negative or the positive key. Let's see the script inside it. Okay, the variables we had, when we want to initialize it, we need to pass the axis name, the button description. The axis name and the button description is a bit different, because the way we will set up our references, our new input manager, will be, let me close this, will be like this. So for the horizontal axis, let's compare it to the actual input manager unit has. Okay, we will have most of the similar stuff, and but for the axis, we're going to need references to know for the positive key and the negative key description. So this way, when you hit play, and I should probably delete the prefab, the right and left are both the horizontal axis, but we want to reassign the positive key, the right, or the negative key, the left. Okay, and that's why we need a description for the button description, what actually going to write. We pass the string, which is the key we currently have, and if it's a negative key or not. Okay, we assign them over here. When we want to change the text of the key, we use this function, and just simply goes and assigns the key. Now, when you want to rebind the axis, so when you actually click on the button, when you actually click on this button, okay, it calls the function from here, and it just goes into the control menu with a singleton, okay, and it opens the rebindable button dialog, which you pass the axis name and if it was the negative key or not. Okay, and we will see this in a bit. So the basic idea for this is to have a list of axes, and similarly to what the input manager is already in Unity, to this, okay, pretty much do the same stuff, but the problem with this with the input manager does is that you actually cannot rebind keys on runtime, so inside the game, unless you have the dialog button in the when you actually have a build. Okay, and since we do not want to use the build, the dialog, the resolution dialog in the beginning anymore, then we need to create our own input manager and override all this stuff, or basically not override, we're simply not using them anymore. And so far in the projects I tested, I haven't seen too much of a difference. Okay, so keep that in mind. Let's close this inspector, we're not going to need him. Now we need to set up the axis, the controls menu. Let's actually see it before we set up the axis. We're going to need all these namespaces except the serialization, so we can use player prefs. It's not something you really care if it's serialized or not. We're going to include the namespace of input control. Okay, and we need a class for every axis. We need to know the axis name, the positive key, the negative key. Okay, keep in mind case sensitive stuff over here, like everywhere you will see P key means positive key and N key negative key. Now we need to know if it's positive or negative. Do we? I think we are actually not using this. Oh no, we use. Yeah. We need to know if it's pressed the positive key or the negative key, but we had it in the inspector because we do not want our users to interact with it, or our users, the other members in our team, interacting with it, since this is all controlled by script. If it's negative, if the negative key is pressed, or if the positive key is pressed. And the current axis value, okay, so when you're using by default the input Unity has, where you use .getAxis, you get this value. We're going to do something similarly. The target axis is the target axis, the target value you want your axis to have. Sensitivity is how fast or how slow your axis will reach the target axis. The positive key description and the negative key description, and we have a reference to the UI buttons, both for the positive button and the negative UI button. Okay, since we basically take it as the positive key and the negative key to be different variables, even though they are in the same axis. So with this we have a list of axes. Even though it's serialized field, you do not really need this, but anyway. Now we need a dictionary the same way as we did in the options menu, so that we can save the default axis. Okay, a dictionary with a string and an integer. We initialize it. The axis prefab is the UI prefab. The axis grid is the grid where every button we create is going to go beneath it, and the rebind button is the rebind dialog, which we take directly from the controls menu. Now I have my controls menu inside the main menu, in the same game object as my main menu, since I know from the main menu script I do not destroy the game object and everything beneath it. Since this is the main menu, you probably want to have it inside your own game, okay, or everywhere in your game. So I know this way that my controls menu is not going to be destroyed when we load the scene. A public bool if we are currently on the rebinding state or not. Okay. Negative key if we are binding and we want to change the negative key, and the target axis we are going to change, and if we actually have initialized once. If we haven't initialized once, so this is, we call the initialize from the main menu. If we haven't initialized once, we want to start by saving all axes, and in here what we do, call two other functions we have, save axis and save axis default. And let's actually go there and not just pick. Okay, save axis. For every axis we have, we call the save and then save axis default. To save an axis, you just go into the player prefs and say set integer, save the player prefs. Both for you take the axis name, you add the positive key, and you take the axis name and you add the prefix of negative key, and you assign the integer. Now the key codes, which is when you use get key code. Okay, all this is an enumeration. You can assign an enumeration like this, or you can say key code one. This will take the second enumeration, since it starts from 0, of the key code enum. Okay, it's the same thing, but in our case, since we want to write them on player prefs, we can only write it as an integer. Save axis defaults does the same, but instead of writing it to the player prefs, it writes it into the default axis that we have. Now, this will probably overwrite, not probably, or most likely, will overwrite all the previous stuff we had. So if you load the game again, or I think it will, let's say it in a bit, so let's go back. We will test it afterwards, because I think I forgot to add, you need to add the prefix if Unity editor and diff. Okay, so it will only save the player prefs if it's in the Unity editor, but if you write it in the Unity editor, the player prefs won't come with the build, so this might be a little bit redundant, but we will see it in a bit what it does. Let's continue on. So we save the axis, we close the rebind button just in case we have left it open, and then we load the all axis again, and this is where it's going to go into the player prefs, and it's going to get the integer for, okay, you assign for every axis you have, you assign the axis. For the positive and the negative key, you get the integer from the player prefs and call it from axis name plus the positive key, and the negative name plus the negative the prefix of if it's the positive key or if the negative key. Since you have the integers, you can now assign the key code with the same way as I showed before, and this is how you actually load your saved axis. So after you load the axis, the only thing you need to do then is to actually go and create the axis buttons. So for each axis you have into your axis list, you create a new instance for the button. We start with creating the positive button first. Okay, we set it under as a parent, as a child of the axis grid, and we assign for that axis, we assign the axis button. We take the axis button and we call it to initialize it by passing the access name, by passing the positive key description, and by making toString the positive key, the name of the key code basically, and you assign for that access the positive UI button. Now, if that access has a negative key, will always have a negative key, but it's not assigned to key code to none. So for every other case that you have a key assigned and it's not that none, it's not the none, so it actually has a negative key, and only then you're going to create another button and for the negative key of that access. Okay, so similarly with the positive key, we create a new button, we assign it as a child of the access grid, we get a reference to the access button, which is the UI element, we initialize it, but instead of passing the positive key description and the toString of the positive key, we pass the negative key description and we pass the negative key toString, and we say true. Since it's the negative key, we want to know if it's the negative key or not, and we assigned a negative UI button to that axis. So this is how we initialize our controls menu. Now we have all our axes, so you need to come over here and write their name, assign by default your default keys. Okay, since we're not loading them from the defaults anymore. Since we're not loading them from here anymore, that means we actually need to come over here and write them. Now I didn't add a lot of stuff like gravity and sensitivity added or dead because those are mostly for joysticks or controllers. Okay, I want to keep this simple for now, and later on we can see what we need to change. Okay, so I'm going to need horizontal, vertical, shoot or aim. Okay, and assign your positive keys, your negative keys where needed. Now for axes that I'm going to use, like horizontal and vertical, I have sensitivity of 3, but for keys that I'm going to use like they are buttons, I have sensitivity up to 1000. So we have all our axes. Now we need to actually see if we are pressing any axis on fixed update. So to do that, inside fixed update, and this is somewhat similar to how Unity actually handles stuff. Okay, because if you lower the time scale to 0, some of the times your axis or your input get button or get axis won't actually work. So I'm pretty sure that this is somewhat similar how they do their own input manager, but they might just use their own threads, although I cannot adapt it. Yeah. Okay, so we'll work with this and we'll see later. So for every axis we have inside our list, we of course assign the axis and we check if the negative or the positive key are pressed. Okay, we do that by using getKey. If they are, now the way I have it over here, the negative key will trump the positive. If you want to be the opposite, just change this to positive, this to negative, and this to 1, and this to -1. Okay, it's entirely up to you. So if there is a negative key pressed, then our target axis will be -1. Else, if there is a positive key pressed, then it's going to be, our target axis will be 1. Else it's going to be 0, that means we are not pressing any keys. Then we simply need to just do a move towards from the current value the axis has to the target axis, and all that by time.delta time multiplied by the sensitivity. Now this is a simple way to do this. You can actually add a lot more cases and a lot more variables to control the sensitivity and how fast it moves and all that, but I found it that with this I couldn't actually see any difference into a lot of the projects, so I think it works just fine. Okay, and this is how you actually use, if you test it right now, you will see that it works just fine. So that goes inside the fixed update, and now we have the variables we are actually using from the UI buttons to actually rebind all, we saw the load access, to rebind our keys. Now, the public variables we're going to use, the public functions we're going to use, one is this, change input key. We pass the name, we pass the key code, and we pass if it's negative or not. And the change input key goes, we call this from the over here, yeah, from the rebinding. Now let's see the change input key first, and then we will see. I want to keep this for the last. So if we want to change an input key, we pass the name, we pass the key, and if it's negative or not. We find the axis by using a return axis function, which similarly to a lot of the stuff we did before. Okay, it looks into our axis list, and if it finds an axis with the same name, it returns it, otherwise it returns null. If the axis is null, then just write that the axis does not exist and return. If not, then if it's negative, assign the negative key, assign the new key to the negative key of that axis, and the negative UI button change the key text to the new negative key. Else do that for the positive key and call to save the actual axis. As we said before, to save the axis, do this. You simply call to go and change the player prefs with the axis name, and you can do it for both, even though, okay, there's no need to know if you're changing the positive or the negative key. Just save both the positive and the negative key at the same time. Okay, return axis, we saw that, and as you notice, these are not even static. I have my controls menu into the as a singleton, as you can see over here. Okay, I do think you're actually going to get something by making variables like this static. Now, axis, save axis default, yeah, we saw that. Let's close this. Okay, this is where we call if we want to change the input key. Return axis. If we want to open the rebind dialog, the rebind button dialog, we need to know the axis name we're going to change it, and if it's negative or not. The target axis will be, we return the axis by using the axis name. We say we want to rebind. We say to the rebind button, we change the name it shows. We enable it, and if it's a negative key or not, we assign it from there. And you also need to just open from the main menu to close the back button, so your players cannot click back while they are on the rebinding button dialog. If you want to close the rebinding, you need to say rebinding equals false, close the rebind button, the UI element, enable again the axis grid, Okay, and enable again the back button. This is the public function you call from when you click cancel into your, when you click this button, the cancel. Okay, you assign it, you drag and drop it and you assign it. And when you actually have rebinding, you need to use the onGUI function, otherwise you won't be able to use correctly the events. Okay, so onGUI, now even though it says onGUI, it's not the actual GUI you will be using. Okay, so you're not doing anything with the old GUI. So if you are rebinding, you close the axis grid. Okay, you do not want the other buttons to show, and you save the events. The event you want to save is the current event, of course. If the current event is not null, then you check if the event is key, and if the event is not a mouse, so it's not a mouse button basically. If that key is not equals the key code none, because if you use is key and you click, then this will actually assign key code to none. So you need to also check if that key code is not none. If it's not, then change input key, you pass the target axis name, you pass the new key code from the event, and you say if it's negative key or not by using the variables over here, which we update by the HUI button. And then we say close the rebinding. Okay, you have rebind the key, no need for this anymore. Now, if the event key was a mouse, then you need to handle things a bit differently. Okay, but you need to also check if your mouse wasn't above and over another game object, is pointer over game object, and this means the UI element. Okay, so you need to add this, otherwise when you are binding another key and click cancel, it's going to take your mouse as the input you want to rebind it to, and of course hit cancel too. Okay, so you need to actually check if your player was above the cancel when he clicked the mouse or not. If he wasn't above the cancel button, you assign the target key with key code none. Okay, and then you say you need to check the event for the button. If that button is 0, then that means the player pressed the mouse 0. If that button was 1, then it pressed mouse 1. And you can continue with all the keys. Okay, the keys, you can actually have a lot more for mouse even. You can see over here it can have up to 7 mouse. So if the target key says that it's not assigned to none, then simply change the input key, pass the target axis name, target key, and if it was the negative or positive key, although this probably will always be false or not. No, forget that. And you close the rebinding dialog. Okay, and this is how you actually have your own input manager or your own axis. Now we need the functions we are using from inside a game. Now, normally in Unity you will use, with the Unity's own input manager, you will use input.getAxis. Okay, so we will name the function that is going to do the exact same thing. We'll name it getAxis too. So we have a public float getAxis, which we pass the name of that input. We start with the value of 0, of course, and it's going to search for, inside our axis list, it's going to search for the axis with the same name, and it's going to assign the value with that axis. Okay, and then it's going to return it, to return the value. If it doesn't find the axis, then it's going to return as 0. So keep that in mind. If you are not getting any input, then it might mean that you have your name wrong. Okay, the get axis is this. Then the other function we're going to use is get button. Similarly, we pass the name, we initialize as false, so that it doesn't actually pressing the button, and it's going to return. If it finds the axis with the same name you're passing, then it's going to make it, if it's positive or not, it's going to return that return value. Now for buttons, I only check if they are positive, okay, since you probably won't even need to have a negative for a button that is going to be used as a button. So by button I mean if it's pressed or not. Okay, you do not really have to check if it's negative or not. Okay, and with this way I think you can actually have a lot more inputs than 32, but keep in mind that the more inputs you add, well, that means that you will have it might make your system lag a bit, since these are not using their own thread to calculate. Okay, just keep that in mind, although I think you probably won't actually need a lot of inputs anyway. Like even for a fighter game that can have 5 or 4 to 8 players, how many buttons you might need? Okay, I don't think you can surpass 64. Yeah, probably. Anyway, okay, so this is basically how you create your own input manager. And now, as I said in the previous video, let's see a bit the main menu in a bit more detail, or let's go blazing through it. Okay, we talk what this all are and where we use them, and we talk about this. You also need the game object that has the control menu, the main menu buttons, do not forget to add the control button, the back button, the options default button, and the controls default button, the current active menu, and if you want to freeze when you are on the menu or not. Current active menu will be, when you're starting, will be the main menu grid, and then you call to open all buttons for the main menu. Now that we have a control menu, we need to actually set it active, assign to call the singleton to get the instance and initialize it, and then reclose it. Okay, otherwise calling this when the control menu is closed, then it's not actually going to call this. Okay, the open buttons, we saw that. Let's close this. On update, if we are loading, we say what it was. If we are not loading, enable the menu, load close the load UI, check the main menu status for when it's open or when you want it open or not. Current active menu, okay, enable menu, or if it's the in-game menu, true or false, and if you want freeze time or not when you are on the menu. Let's close this. To close all buttons, you need to just go into all the buttons and deactivate them. And to open since we now have the 2 more buttons for the reset, options default button, you also need to close it. The back button, you also need to close that too, and the control default button, close that too. The status remains the same. If you want to start a new game, just add your own logic over here. Okay, and enable or disable, yeah, you might not even need this. To add the level, close the back button, change the current active menu to the main menu grid, change the status to in-game, loading is true, and start the coroutine to load the second level. First one is always 0. To open the options menu, just close all open the stuff that have to do with the menu, open the back button, change the current active menu to the options menu, and call the singleton, get a component from the options menu and load settings. To open the main menu, so when you are actually hitting the back button, check if the previous current active menu was the options menu, and if it was, then save the files on a text as we saw on the previous video. Change current active menu to the main menu grid and close all the other buttons that have to do with either the options or the controls. Open the controls menu, change the current active menu to the control menu, the game object. Open the back button and open the controls default button. Okay, load main menu. You close enable menu to false, in-game menu to false. Change current active menu to the main menu grid. Assign this is for when you're going from your game into the main menu scene. Okay, you change the status from in-game to main. Loading is through and start the coroutine to load the main menu and application quit. The coroutine to load the level, target level. Okay, you'll return scene manager, load scene async, and when this ends, it's going to say loading is false. Change current active menu, closes the previous active menu, assigns the new active menu with the target menu, and enables the current active menu. It's also a singleton, and we have probably had to have the don't destroy on load instead. Yeah. In my third person shooter series, I have the resource manager in this script in here, so that's why I do not have the don't destroy on load. So you can just say don't destroy on load game object over here. Okay. And that was the main menu and the main buttons we saw. Now let's actually go and see how to apply the new input manager into a script. So let me open the third person shooter project. So back into our own game. Now I'll hit play. I'm going to go and reassign the control keys. Controls. Let's add the aim to something else, to knee or whatever. Let's hit new game and start game. And I'm actually pressing knee, although you won't be able to see it. Now, how do we use our own input manager instead of Unity's one? So we'll go into our character, we'll go into our input handler, and because we did the nice thing to actually handle our input into the same function, okay, to use our own input manager, instead of using the previous one where we had horizontal equals input dot get access horizontal, we can actually use our own. Now this is an example, and okay, you do not have to use this all the time. You can add using namespace over here. Okay, using input control. Come over here and say control manager, controls menu, CM, and then CM equals controls menu dot get instance, and come over here and say just CM. Okay, you do not have to use the name all the time. So instead of using input, you can actually just call it our own, and you will see that it will going to work exactly like using this thing. If you notice otherwise, then just say so, and we're going to check this stuff. Now of course this is more for platforms like that actually have a keyboard and a mouse, but you probably will be able to use a joystick. If you want to use mobile this input manager, yeah, you're probably going to have problems. But you probably, in most mobile games, you cannot actually rebind keys anyway, so okay, you need to handle stuff differently over there. Okay, this is exactly the same. Use get access, and if you are pressing mouse 1 or mouse 2, you can actually use get access for shooting, or use get button, mouse 1 or mouse 2. I use get access since this and actually let's just use get button. And because these are floats for a reason that I'm not remember right now why. Okay, so let's just use get access and be done with it, since it works as it should. But for something, let's add a new control. Let's add a new access. Let's say we want this one. You see that I have my resource manager, that the resource manager has the don't destroy unload, so I do not need to add this into the main menu for this project. So into our controls menu, let's add a new axis. So we need size 5. Let's call this pickup. Let's change the positive key to X. Let's leave this to 1000. Let's add this to pickup. I'm going to copy paste the name, and I'm going to go into the item pickup behavior, or I think where we actually had this. Yeah, over here where we had the actual pickup. What we're going to do over here is say input control dot controls menu dot get instance dot get button pickup. Okay, and we can actually go into where we open the dialog. Let's change the name, if I find where it is, of course. Items base, item pickup behavior. Yeah, anyway, I cannot find it right now. Let's test it out. Let's hit play. Controls. We have another button into our input list. Okay, start game. When we're going over a pistol or another weapon, and press X, you can see that I actually have my weapon. So I think let's actually test if we want to save the axis from start or not. So let me go back into the previous project. So I made a build on which we're going to load. Okay, now we have our options and we have our controls. Let's default it back again. So let's change them to, I'm just pressing stuff at random. Okay, hit back, hit quit, load them once again. Controls, and it still has saved them, so we actually were correct to add the save if we are in the Unity editor to save them. Okay, so I'll end the video here. We did a lot of stuff. Just make sure you actually assign the references to all the UI buttons and all that, both for the options and the controls. And this actually is a pretty good template for using to an options menu. And let's not end the video here. Let's go see. Let me open another project, which is an identical project to this. So this is the same project, but it doesn't have anything in here. Okay, there's no lighting information, so keep that in mind. There's no art, there's no models, there's no nothing. There's only the UI with the defaults Unity has, and my scripts, and you don't need these two scripts anyway. So if you export package now, these are for just shaking the camera, so you don't need them. If you export the scene, as I did over here, let's click export, or let me just export. Okay, so I've exported the package, and you will see that my whole template is just 70 kilobytes. Now let's go find another project and load this inside that project. So this is the turn-based project. Notice, and this is our options export. Let's just add it. Import. So we have two scenes right now. If I open the main menu, hit play. Yeah, of course we need to actually assign the level references, since this does not have anything. So for these level references, since this takes only mono behaviors, we can simply just say let's just add a few image effects, or let's just add one and go add the same one into everything. It doesn't matter. Okay, and if I go save right now, if I go to this scene and start adding image effects over here, like bloom, let's add tone mapping. Yeah, you need an HDR over here too, and anti-aliasing. I'm just randomly adding them right now. Okay, so whatever, just to show. Okay, and create empty. Let's call this level references. Add component level references 4. Let's lock this. Let's add a new inspector. Let's go into our main camera. Let's assign them. This will be bloom. This will be AA. And yeah, I should probably assign this. Oh, yeah, I should check if they are assigned. Anti-aliasing. Depth of field, and I don't remember the other one, but it was probably SSAO, but we're going to assign the tone mapping to the SSAO. Okay, just an example. And we also need the custom connector. I can also do, for the custom connector, I can uncomment this. So I'm only going to do for the bloom, since it uses the same bloom. the standard assets bloom. Okay, let it compile, drag and drop your bloom. I'm going to unlock this, I won't need this anymore, I'm saving it. And on build settings I'm going to add the open scene, and I'm going to add the menu scene, but I'm going to add the menu scene first. So in my scripts, into my options menu, I'll open the main menu, and on start new game I'll go to say load let me see, I'm going to say load the level directly actually, so I'm just going to do a change, so I'm not adding anything over here, and I'm going to go back into the first scene, menu, into the new game, so start game or whatever. Instead of using the function start new game, I'm going to use the load level, and it's going to load the other level. Let's hit play, and if everything works we have a null references. Let's see why. Yeah, because we do not have on the custom connector we do not have assigned a bloom, so we'll do that. Let's hit play once again, and we still get an error. Let's see what it was. Something with the quality buttons, which will probably something that we forget. Options menu, quality, let me see for this. So basically this thing does you need to add a check if the queue is null or not, and since we are looking for the streaming assets folder, then it's good to actually have the streaming assets inside your project, otherwise you'll be getting a few errors when you click back. Let's hit play, options, back. If I change good or to whatever I want, now this won't work since we only have the bloom, but they're actually going to work for, so I'm going to disable the depth of field, but they're going to work for inside the game. So I'm clicking back. Okay, you see that it starts because it didn't find a .txt, but since when we click back it writes the txt, then you won't be seeing the error anymore, since you probably should have streaming assets over here, and I don't know what happened. Anyway, let's go see. Let's click new game, and we only see that there is a reference to a game object that is destroyed. So let's see what this was. Main menu, get distance. We have destroyed that game object because, yeah. So inside main menu we're going to say don't destroy on load game object. Close this. Let's stop this. Now it shows the Unity waits until you go out of play mode to import the txt. Okay, let's clear it again, and let's see it one more time. I'm going to go into options and keep close the depth of field anyway. Go back, new game, loads the level, and you see that we do not have a depth of field. Now you see that it's all gray, it's all darkened, and that is because to avoid this problem in Unity, you need to go into your lighting over here, uncheck the auto and click build. Okay, this is a bug that Unity has. It's not really a bug, because it just assumes, oops, yeah, I do not want any of this. It's just that Unity assumes that you are working on the lights, so that's why you want to have the auto, and that's why it doesn't load the lighting when you are loading that level. So we see that in 5 minutes, for a new for a completely new project, we just added a whole options menu and controls menu, even though in this case they won't do anything, since they are this is a turn-based game. Okay. So while we wait until this, I think I've showed anything I want to show. This template is it's a pretty good start for when you want to add an options menu and a controls menu into your own game. Okay, so it's something you do once and then you reuse it in all your projects, and you can change the menu around, okay, or change the buttons. It's completely independent from how you use it, and you can have a pretty good jump start into any project. So I'll end the video here, since it just loads the reflection probes. Do not forget to like and subscribe. Also consider supporting me on Patreon or with a project or two on Gumroad, and next time we'll see some pretty good stuff. So I'll see you next time.